You figured it was about time, so you let the flames inside die down naturally, thinking you'd let the pottery cool overnight, and you could open the kiln tomorrow morning. After a day's labor, the tribesmen were all tired, but they sat around the campfire, each face beaming with a happy smile. Now they didn't have to go hungry anymore, but the main thing was, you had turned those two big birds into beggars' chicken, and they had never eaten such delicious food before, but you didn't have much of an appetite, because these foods only had a little bit of coarse salt sprinkled on them, and you couldn't taste any saltiness at all. Coarse salt was very precious now, and it was said that it was exchanged with other tribes. You secretly calculated in your heart whether you could exchange some more back with pottery. After everyone finished eating, the women went back to the cave to start weaving baskets. They found that the carrying baskets were really useful, and today the gathering team had fewer people, but the harvest was even greater, and you distributed all the animal skins, and now the children could squeeze together and have blankets to cover themselves with. When you woke up the next morning, you immediately went to check the results of the pottery firing. The child immediately pulled the elder over, babbling and saying something to the elder, looking quite nervous. You yourself were actually very nervous. After all, your salt exchange plan, and the meat soup you had been longing for. These days, you had eaten enough of that dry roasted meat. With the feeling of smashing a golden egg, you lifted the dirt lid of the kiln and stretched your head over to take a look. All the pottery bowls were a bright terracotta color, and the surface had signs of melting due to the high temperature. But, unexpectedly, it seemed to be covered with a layer of glaze. Seeing this, the cripple snatched the pottery bowl and excitedly stroked it up and down. Then he dropped his crutches, which he never let go of, and stumbled back to the cave. Before long, he came running out with a bowl of water, howling and excitedly showing the tribesmen this beautiful container that could hold water. You smiled and continued to take the pottery out. The 4 casseroles and 4 small water tanks were fired very successfully. The smooth surface had no cracks. Only 2 of the 8 spoons were finished. The rest were melted, all stuck together, and of the 20 pottery bowls, only 12 didn't affect their use. One by one, the terracotta pottery pieces came out of the kiln, bringing the tribe not only shock, but also excitement. Beast-tooth and strong hands and feet were the fastest, each hugging a jar and running to the river, and soon brought back 2 jars of water. Although the elder was excited, he could still remain calm, and consulted you on how this was done with gestures and words. Before you could speak, the 2 little partners who helped yesterday rushed to explain to him that it was made of earth, but what you cared about most was whether you could exchange it for salt. So you gestured and expressed this question to the elder. Unexpectedly, the elder looked at you with an expression of looking at a spendthrift, pointing at the pottery of all sizes, and pointing at the adults and children in the tribe, telling you in his native language, with heartache, just how precious this thing was. After understanding, you were completely shocked. Even a bowl could be exchanged for a boy who was about to reach adulthood, or 2 girls, let alone those water tanks and casseroles. In the various tribes now, there were very few containers for holding water, and it was common to grind a stone basin for a lifetime. And in order to obtain more containers, some tribes would not hesitate to exchange people. They felt that there was no use in having more people, and they would consume more food. But you didn't think so. More people could get more food, and it also increased the tribe's combat power. The addition of new members also injected fresh blood into the tribe. At least it could reduce the concept of origin, like the 6 fingers. Thinking of this, you immediately assigned a trade mission. The elder and 7 members of the hunting team were all dispatched, carrying a water tank, a casserole, and 3 pottery bowls in their carrying baskets. To exchange for people and salt, use a water tank to exchange for 2 adult women. Exchange a casserole for 2 boys who are about to reach adulthood. Exchange all 3 pottery bowls for salt. If there is no salt, use the pottery bowls to exchange for girls. After saying this, the few people immediately set off, and you continued to arrange the work for the other tribesmen today. The trade was conducted with a tribe west of the tribe, crossing a mountain, and then crossing a river, and the group quickly arrived at their destination. This tribe was slightly larger than your Han tribe, with a population of about 80 or 90, and the 2 tribes had often exchanged things before. Seeing that the elder and his group had brought things to exchange, the other side's balding chief immediately greeted them. After a brief conversation, the elder took out a pottery bowl from the carrying basket and handed it to him, using it to exchange for salt stones. The balding chief's eyes lit up. This pottery bowl was smooth inside and out, and much lighter than the stone basin in his tribe. He immediately asked 2 tribesmen to get a small bag of salt stones and hand it to the elder, but the elder took the bag and shook his head after taking a look. We want more, and this time we also want to exchange for 2 adult women. Saying that, he asked Strong Hand to take out the water tank. The balding chief was immediately dumbfounded. This water tank was so big, he could store more water in the future, but the next moment he hesitated. Exchanging 2 women for such a big water tank was really cost effective, but right now it was the autumn season for collecting food, and losing 1 person would mean less harvest. But in the end, he still agreed with a smile. Losing 1 person would reduce consumption. This wave was a bloody profit. Before long, 2 naked, skinny women were brought over. They were adult sisters. The older sister was also holding a 4-year-old naked little boy, who was still not moving, with his eyes closed. Obviously he was sick. We will use these 2 people to exchange for your big water tank. And the little boy is a gift for you." The balding chief waved his hand in disgust, seeming to urge the 2 women to leave quickly. The elder looked at the 2 frail women, didn't say anything, and asked Stone to take out the pottery pot he was carrying, and the rest of the pottery bowls. "If you want it, you can exchange the boy for it." The balding chief had just exchanged for a large tank, and now when he saw the slightly smaller pottery pot, although he liked it, he still waved his hand to indicate that he wouldn't exchange it. Seeing this, the elder had no choice but to demonstrate on the spot according to the method the new chief had taught in the morning, using the pottery pot to cook a pot of meat soup. Soon, the strong aroma of meat wafted out of the pot, and the other tribe members immediately began to swallow saliva wildly. "So it turns out that meat can be eaten like this." The balding chief couldn't wait to take the pottery bowl from the elder's hand, which contained a few pieces of stewed meat and meat soup. The balding chief hesitated and took a sip, and was immediately shocked. "My God, it's so fragrant." The salty and fragrant meat soup had a layer of beautiful oil flowers floating on it, and the delicious and juicy stewed meat made the whole person feel comfortable with just one bite. "It's just a few kids. Must exchange." At this time, the balding chief finally became generous and agreed happily. He also asked his little brother to move out a large bag of salt stones and fill the elder's back basket. Seeing this, the elder nodded with satisfaction, and then the group began a mighty journey. When they returned, the team had 7 people, plus the 9 people they bought. The numbers had gone up to 16. This harvest was much better than a day of hunting. The group hurried on their way and finally returned to the Han tribe near dusk. It's just that, the few people who had been bought just walked to the open space at the entrance of the cave. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were all shocked. At this time, the elder led a group of people back to the tribe in a mighty manner, and was immediately shocked by the scene in front of him. At the entrance of the cave were the 4 water tanks, 4 pots, and a large pile of pottery bowls that the cripple had fired today. The cripple was looking at these pottery pieces and giggling foolishly. This was the happiest day of his life. And on the other side of the open space, hundreds of large fish were hanging together to dry in the wind. The women next to them were all smiling. These were all meat, and now they could also catch meat, especially those who had just been exchanged. Adults and children were all dumbfounded. You should know that a stone basin could be exchanged for 2 people, but this tribe actually had so much pottery. Could this exchange all the people in their tribe back? And those hanging meat should all be edible. It seemed that coming to this tribe was not bad. The elder led the people to report to you. 8 naked people, plus a naked child. You squinted your eyes and walked past them one by one, each one skinny, obviously malnourished, but it didn't matter. The tribe had plenty of meat, and they could all make up for it in one winter. Finally, when you walked to the woman holding the child was motionless, and his face was also very red. You touched the child's forehead. It was like a small stove. You quickly dragged the woman into the cave, first found an animal skin to wrap the mother and child, and let them sit by the fire pit to warm themselves. And you were pacing around anxiously. There were no medicines now. How could you bring down the fever? Suddenly your eyes lit up. That's right, scraping could bring down the fever. Thinking of this, you immediately started preparing. First you boiled a pot of clear fish soup by the fire pit. Then you went to find bones that could be used for scraping. The beak of the peacock you had before was half a meter long. Breaking it and getting a small piece was enough. The woman holding the child didn't know what you were going to do. After you touched her child, you had been frowning. She was worried that you would throw her child away. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but shed tears. Just then, you walked up to her with a piece of bird beak fragment. "Give me the child. I can help you save him." The woman didn't understand what it meant, but she could feel that you were better to her than the previous chief. So she handed the child to you tremblingly. You held the bone fragment and scraped red marks on the child's body. The child in a coma frowned in pain, and kept crying. When the child's mother saw this, she immediately wanted to snatch her child back, but she was quickly held down firmly by 2 women. Before long, you returned the child whose whole body was covered with red marks to her, and then scooped a bowl of fish soup and fed it to her child spoonful by spoonful. The child didn't know how long he had been hungry, and swallowed it directly as soon as he came into contact with the fish soup. You immediately breathed a sigh of relief. If he could eat, there was still hope. As long as he could sweat after a while, his little life could be saved. The woman was also completely relieved, although she didn't know what you were doing just now, but it didn't look like you were going to harm her child. As soon as she relaxed, her stomach, which hadn't eaten in 2 days, started rumbling, and she kept swallowing saliva as she looked at the fish soup in front of her. You immediately scooped a bowl of fish soup and handed it to her along with a large piece of fish. Then you took the child from her arms and wrapped it in animal skin. At this time, you were worried to death death. A small fever could kill someone. Now the problem of everyone's food was temporarily solved. But what about clothes? If you wanted to save as many animal skins as possible, you still had to hunt large animals. But the current weapons couldn't do it at all. In the future, you had to go out with them for hunting, find some materials to make weapons, and at least make some traps and ropes. You secretly vowed in your heart that before winter came, you must make sure that everyone had a piece of clothing. When everyone had finished eating, the little boy woke up and was covered in sweat. You handed him to the woman, personally tied his hair up, and gave him a name called Tubing. The woman was very happy. The new tribe's chief not only saved her child's life, but also tied his hair up like everyone else, which meant that he accepted them, and the others who came today also completed their bondage with the help of the elderly. And at first glance, they looked different from other tribes, and looked a lot more energetic. After finishing all this, you started making equipment for yourself, picked out a stick that was still relatively straight, tied the spearhead made of peacock leg bone to one end of the stick, and a primitive bone spear appeared. Then you broke off some peacock beaks, ground them into a short knife, and gave the remaining materials to the cripple, so that he could also make one. Now you only have these two pieces of equipment. You have to do everything yourself. Early the next morning, after the tribesmen got up, you arranged new tasks. The cripple continued to make pottery, and you must first ensure that everyone has a bowl. The adult women were divided into two teams. One team went to collect wild fruits, one team went to catch fish, and the remaining children stayed to help hunt. You personally led the team, the entire hunting team members, plus the two little partners who usually followed you, Big Mouth and Monkey, and the two brothers, Da Mao and Amao, who you just bought yesterday. A team of 11 people marched into the jungle in large strides, facing the morning sun. After entering the jungle, the hunting team dispersed, and each adult hunted separately. You took the four younger brothers, Big Mouth and Monkey, Da Mao and Amao, each of them carrying a carrying basket, and a bundle of straw ropes, to help you. Most of the trees in this forest were nut-bearing trees, each of which was more than 30 meters high, but looking at the more than 1 meter thick diameter, you couldn't do anything about them. After all, there were no metal tools yet. The ground was covered with nuts, and from afar, you could see some large birds foraging on the ground, but you only observed along the way, and didn't hunt any animals. As an excellent hunter, you must first figure out what prey there is in your hunting ground. The little partners who followed behind were a little impatient, and several times when they saw the guinea fowl eating nuts, they were eager to try. You didn't pay attention to them at all. You just kept calculating in your heart. Since this mountain was a complete food chain, some small animals can be seen everywhere in this forest, then there must be large carnivores. In fact, this was also the case. You could tell from the footprints and feces left on the ground. Soon you discovered traces of wild boars. Judging from the messy footprints, there should be a group. It's just that the depth of that footprint really scared you a bit. It looked like it weighed at least 1,000 pounds. You should know that this is a real primeval forest, all the way towards the stream. You finally crossed the highlands of the ridge, and suddenly your eyes lit up. In the valley ahead, there was a sparkling stream, and by the stream were some huge aloes. At this time, a dozen wild boars were drinking water by the stream. It looked like a complete family. The leading boar weighed an estimated 1,500 pounds, followed by its big mama, second mama, third mama, and more than a dozen piglets the size of domestic pigs. It was definitely not possible to rush up and fight head-on with such an existence. It was safer to make a trap. You quietly retreated to the ground and returned to the woods. The little partners were scared to death. They just wanted to hit a pheasant, dig a mouse hole or something. They had never even thought about such a goal. You didn't count on them at all, and started to set up traps alone, using grass ropes to make several figure, six-shaped nooses on the pig's footprints, the other end directly tied to a big tree. As long as the pig's hoof stepped in, the noose would automatically tighten, and the more it struggled, the tighter it would become. This kind of trap was very suitable for use now. It was simple and quick to make. For safety, the little partners climbed up the trees under your arrangement. Now you just needed to make the group of pigs turn back. You quietly went around to the bushes on the other side of the stream, and wrapped yourself in leaves. Holding up two branches, you suddenly jumped out from behind the bushes, while shouting at the top of your lungs to drive them away. The herd of pigs had never seen such a creature, and immediately scattered and ran into the woods. You chased after them, shouting and running, and before long you heard the wails of wild boars in front. When you got to the trap area, you saw two struggling wild boars. The leading boar was among them, as well as an adult sow. This kind of grass rope wouldn't last long. You approached carefully with a bone spear, and at the right time, you stabbed it into its open mouth. The sharp bone spear directly pierced its back neck, and pig blood sprayed out as if it didn't cost money. Before long, the 1,500-pound behemoth finally fell to the ground, its body twitching from time to time. You finally breathed a long sigh of relief, but soon a problem was in front of you. How could you get such a big wild boar back with only 5 children? Looking at the sow struggling next to you, your eyes suddenly lit up, and you immediately started to act. First, the sow was controlled on the tree with grass ropes. Then its mouth was tied tightly with ropes to prevent it from biting people. Then, 2 ropes were tied to the sow's 2 front legs. And finally, the dead boar's ropes were tied to the sow's body. After everything was done, you led the sow by its mouth and guided the direction in front. Big Mouth and Monkey each held one of the sow's front legs and walked on both sides. The sow pulled the dead boar back to the tribe. Da Mao and Amao held sticks and walked at the back to guard against animal ambushes, and occasionally hit the sows but with sticks, rushing at full speed. In this way, you walked through the dense jungle, and finally saw the tribe's cave from afar. A little partner cleaning the bushes outside was the first to discover it. He shouted and notified the tribe, and before long they all came out to greet them, but they all dared to approach. They had never seen such a large prey. They called the cripple, and asked him to prepare a water tank. He also wanted salt, so he ran to prepare with his legs wrapped. After he brought the water tank over, you dug a pit in the ground, and then put the water tank in the pit. The mouth of the tank was only a little above the ground. Then everyone pressed the sow next to the water tank, and you stabbed its neck directly with a knife. The blood sprayed into the water tank without spilling a drop, and before long it was full of blood. Pour a bowl of salt water into it, mix well, and it would soon become delicious blood tofu, which could be used to make soup at night. The wild boar's skin was trimmed, and could be used to make leather boots or backpacks. These 2 pigs should be able to make a lot of leather. The white lard under the skin was as thick as 4 fingers, and it could be put on the fire to refine it later, except for the pig lungs, which were taken to catch fish. The rest could be eaten. Even the larger bones were all removed, and could be used to grind weapons or something. The entire afternoon was spent on these 2,000-pound giant pigs. It was tiring, but the results were very gratifying. The smoking rack was full of meat chunks of all sizes, a tank of cooked blood tofu, and 3 tanks of white lard. The children were smiling and constantly picking up the fried lard residue, and even Shubing was eating happily. Just as the cripple was opening the kill to take out the pottery in the evening, the large force that had been busy all day returned triumphantly. The fishing team had caught a total of several hundred fish, and even the fish bladders were filled with a basket, and there were 2 large tanks of fish roe. The hunting team was not bad either. 3 pheasants and 2 large snakes, more than 10 bird eggs and a dozen groundhogs, and a basket of nuts. Even more surprising was the gathering team. Today Shubing's aunt led the gathering team, and found a new food, which was a very sweet tree root. When the outer skin was cut open, there was actually natural amber-colored syrup inside. If you collect a little more, you can refine white sugar. For this you also specially praised the girl, and everyone ate happily together. But there was always someone who was different from everyone else. The elder had a black face, and was chasing Shubing's aunt and beating her with a thorny vine full of red thorns. In the original owner's memory, you knew that that vine was a tool similar to family law in the tribe, used to beat people who had made big mistakes. Seeing this, you quickly stopped the angry elder and asked him the reason for hitting someone. As a result, he said an incredible reason. That kind of tree root was the bait of the demon tree, and all those who stole the tree root would be eaten by the demon tree. Hearing this, you quickly told everyone to stop eating this tree root, not because you really believed what he said, but because you were worried that this thing might really be poisonous, or that eating it could be addictive. Because of this, you were very alert when you went to bed at night, carefully feeling the changes in your body. Fortunately, nothing happened overnight. When the tribesmen came out in the morning, you began to arrange the work for today. The others were the same as usual. The only difference was that Shubing and his mother went to the fishing team, and you took 4 little brothers to the gathering team. You wanted to see what the demon tree the elder was talking about was all about. The location of that tree was in the depths of the back mountain of the cave. There were not many tall trees on this mountain, but the bushes were very lush, and there were also many catching trees. During the journey, you were pleasantly surprised to find the chili peppers you had been thinking about, a red patch, hidden in the bushes. But the tribesmen never ate this. The stimulating taste of this thing made them think that this thing was poisonous. You immediately ordered 4 little brothers. They didn't have to do anything else today, just concentrate on picking chili peppers here. You followed the gathering team and continued to move forward, crossed a mountain ridge, and what came into view was a basin. Here, animal skeletons with a greenish color could be seen everywhere, like a mass grave, and in the center of this basin, a strange tree about 60 meters high stood there. The roots covered an area of 500 meters. The closer to the center, the more roots there were. Such a pattern seemed to be attracting animals to approach the trunk. Your intuition told you that the closer to the trunk, the more dangerous it would be, but you still planned to take a closer look. With your skills, you were confident that you could retreat safely. You took every step, poked the ground in front of you with a spear, and slowly approached the middle. But just when your spear touched the area covered by the canopy, the intuition cultivated by years of being a special soldier told you that danger was about to come. Without saying a word, you quickly retracted the spear and retreated the way you came. At this time, the sound of wind breaking suddenly came from the sky, and more than 10 spikes nearly 1 meter and 2 long inserted straight into the ground. The target was the place where your spear had just touched. These spikes were very strange, each one with a diameter of nearly 1 centimeter. The shortest was more than 1 meter long, and the end had a white flower the size of a bowl. Isn't this a natural arrow? You were immediately overjoyed. The illusion of cow borrowing arrows with straw boats suddenly popped into your head. You used your carrying basket as a target, tied a long rope to the carrying basket, threw it under the canopy, and swish swish swish, and instantly inserted more than 10 spikes. Pull the basket back, pull out the spikes, and repeat the operation until you got 2 large bundles. Then you retreated out with a spear. When you went out, you told those women that the tree roots could be eaten, but they were only allowed to collect the outer ones. On the way back to the tribe, you collected 100 more demon tree seedlings in the forest, which had grown to be 3 centimeters thick. These grew straight, and were the best materials for making spears. You called the 4 little brothers who were collecting chili peppers, and the 5 of you carried these small saplings home together. Back to the tribe, the children were again watching the new things that the chief had brought back. But in the eyes of those women, the things you brought back were useless. Chili peppers could not be eaten, and the sticks were not thick enough. They could not kill the prey even if they hit them. But this did not affect your happy mood at all. In the remaining time, you wanted to update your equipment well. The peeled spikes had a delicate and hard texture, and were about the same diameter as a cigarette. If they were made into arrows, they should also be heavy arrows, although it would affect the range. But the penetration was strong, and the 3 centimeters thick saplings, because of the hard wood, had to be carbonized on the surface, and then ground into a sharp point, which was definitely enough for hunting. This job of grinding the spearheads was naturally left to the 4 little brothers. In the future, all the people in the tribe would be equipped with this new type of spear. Now all that's left is a bow. With the current conditions, you can only make a longbow. Although it is heavy, the power is not weak at all, and the best material for making a longbow is sandalwood, which can be found in the forest where you caught the wild boars yesterday. You just need to find a suitable size. In fact, what you were most concerned about was the aloe vera you found when you were hunting wild boars. Its leaves were rich in fiber, which was the best material for making cables. It could also be used to weave cloth to make clothes. Although it was not as good as rami, it was always better than animal skins, and it was also very strong. More importantly, the juice of its leaves can be used to treat wounds, which can not only reduce inflammation and detoxify, but also clear heat and reduce fire. Thinking of this, you plan to start planting aloe vera on a large scale from next year. At that time, the tribesmen will have clothes to wear, and it will also greatly reduce the infection deaths caused by hunting injuries.